Hello, everyone. Welcome to another author's interview on the podcast. I'm your host, Gabriel Garcia, otherwise known as the Wandering Quill and Wandering Scribe. Joining me today is my second guest from the LA Festival of Books. My guest today is an online missionary, Bible teacher, and author of Angelic Wars, First Rebellion. Joining us today for the first time on the podcast is author Rick Norris. Rick, thank you so much for joining us today.
Gabriel, thank you so much for having me here today. It's exciting to be here with you.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you. So tell us a little bit more about yourself and Angelic Wars, First Rebellion, and that whole series.
Sure. Well, as you said, I'm an online missionary. I volunteer for that. I've been a Bible teacher for 35 years, I think it is, and teaching both online and I've taught Sunday school all the way down to middle school and up to adults. So that's why in my books, I actually have footnotes to the Bible. Even though this is fiction, the book's Angelic Wars series is the story of the internal struggles and the external battles among the angels for the control of heaven during Lucifer's rebellion. And so it's kind of like Star Wars, Lord of the Rings in heaven. And what happens in the book is that a guardian cherub is brought out from God to commission 7 angels called the Septemviri to find the rebellion going on in heaven and to offer them mercy first and then judgment if they reject that. Little do these 7 know, kind of like Lord of the Rings type thing, is that it's 1/3 of heaven. And the leader is Lucifer, aka Satan, aka Prince of Darkness, aka Devil, and he is trying to bring others to his side because he's saying that he had discovered that he had a free will and that God never told the angels that they had a free will, that kind of gift, in that because angels follow the will of God, so there's no reason for them
Mm-hmm.
to have a free will. And so he starts this whole rebellion based on this. And the prequel called Into the Mind of Lucifer is only 46 pages, talks about this realization of his. And again, it's all fiction, but where there is places that they coordinate with the Bible, where it could be like the settings in Revelation, they actually talk about what heaven looks like, part of it. And then also what angels look like is from the prophet Ezekiel. We have Daniel. We have different things in the Old Testament that talk about angels, what they look like, seraphim and cherubim. I use those. And when the good angels talk, I will use the scripture sometimes. And I footnotes those too. So in the first book, I think there was 180 footnotes. In the second one, I think like 200 footnotes to the Bible. And so it's been a lot of fun doing it, putting all this together. But to be an additional thing for the reader is they are a new type of genre called the musical novel. And so because angels may sing when they get in trouble, they'll call out to God, they'll sing to God, or maybe they'll be excited and they'll praise God. I wrote music for the book so that when you scan a QR code in a hard copy or an ebook, e-link in the ebook, you will hear the characters sing to you. So it's a whole new level of character development for the reader.
And that is true, listeners. When I actually use my phone to listen to the QR codes of the songs, wow, it really adds a lot of depth and a lot of like visual, imaginary. I don't know if that's even a word, but it definitely paints a picture of what the world is, which is fascinating. So let's dive into First Rebellion. So, how did that initial book come about? What was the thought process behind it?
Well, I was teaching the Bible back in the 90s and had been through a Bible study course with a very good teacher for 5 years. And I was wondering about, they talk about this battle between good and evil at the beginning of Satan and getting kicked out of heaven, and Michael is involved in it, like that. Kind of wondered, well, what kind of went on like that? And so I was on a plane ride when I was a CPA. I know people believe that I'm a CPA and musician. author now, fantasy author. But I was coming back, and I sat down next to this woman who we were talking, and she was telling me about her life, that her husband had just died. She was left with two teenage daughters, and then 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, she found out that she had MS. Really
Mm.
tough. And so, she's telling me this stuff, and it's not like she's asking for sympathy, because she wasn't. She was pretty jovial. And she said, what do you do, and what do you like? And she saw that I had a book on my on the platform, the little tray that you put down. I think it might have been The City of God by Augustine.
Right.
And she said, "Well, you're a Christian?" I said, "Yeah." And I told her about teaching the Bible and whatever. And I said, I just had this idea of writing a novel about angels fighting in heaven. And she looked at me and she said, "Write it. Write the novel. Now, don't delay anymore. Just write the novel now." And
Wow.
and here's somebody who really is going through a very difficult time in her life. And she is concerned over me about what I'm doing. And I just took that as a message. I always teach in the Bible, it comes from First Kings and Elijah, that God whispers. And those are the things that I take as being a whisper. And so what you do when you hear whispers is you test it. You walk through the door. If it closes, then it's not for him. But another door open. And so I did. And my second book is done. And the third book will come out in 2014. And there's been several short stories that are actually free, that are about characters in the first two books, in scenes, but from a different point of view of the scene that's in the book.
Wow.
So I'm having a lot of fun doing this. I'm just having a blast. And you have a lot of followers that are really encouraging to me and pushing me along, which really helps a lot, let me tell you.
That is true. It is true. When you get a good fan base, a lot of followers really enjoying your content, it really has like a sense of like, okay, this is something that I'm meant to do. Now, Rick, were you always a writer growing up, or did that come later in life?
Well, I also, as a CP, I went to law school. So I was learning to write briefs. But what thing law school did teach me was looking at both points of view. So when writing a novel, I can give the good side and the bad side discussions. And you will see in the books, there'll be scenes where you'll flash over to the bad side guy's point of view, and other scenes where you'll slash to the good guy's point of view. And so it's actually giving me some background. But as far as writing novels, no. I can remember when I was in ninth grade, and we were doing composition writing, and
Mm-hmm.
I wrote something, and I handed in, and after class or after things were great or whatever, the teacher came up to me and she said, "You write pretty well." And I said, "Really?" Well, that was the end of that. But then what happened is that I went to book conferences. And for beginning writers, that's a good thing to do. There's lots of resources there. And I learned a lot. I gave a 5-page synopsis to somebody of this story that you have. And the person said, this is like 10 years ago, 11 years ago. And the person, the judge, we sat down one-on-one, and he said, "You're a storyteller." And I said, "Okay, I guess." And he said, "That's great." He said, "That's a really big thing to have when you're writing a novel." He says, "Now what you got to learn is the craft." He said,
Right.
and that's the easy part. That's what he said. That's the easy part. Well, I don't know about that. But so then what happened after that is I befriended an agent from there, and he sent me to a woman named Susan May Warren. She is a Christian author. She is a USA Times bestseller. And she also taught writing. And so she was my mentor. She was my one-on-one teacher for quite a while. And so I learned from her. And there's been other people like editors like that where I've learned a lot.
Right.
Even now, I just finished 2 other books. One of them is it takes the point of view of writing, thinking about method acting, but taking method acting and converting it over into writing. And that's a great thing. I thought that was fantastic because I like method actors, and I kind of analyzed it. So I'm always learning, always trying to be better at the next book, and so it's great. And as far as the music that I do, my dad, well, music's in our family. My
Right.
dad was a rockabilly singer with back in the 1950s, had a recording contract with Capitol Records. And he never made it big, but his music is still online. And so I grew up, I started playing the guitar at 6, and I, started playing it. And then our second son, he started becoming a jazz piano player, and he is co-producer of my music. He writes music for television right now and movies.
Right.
So music has been part of my life, and now writing is part of my life for the last 10 plus years.
Wow. Nice. Very, very nice. So with all these things together, creating Angelic Wars First Rebellion, do you remember what the initial response was like when you published First Rebellion? What was the initial feedback?
Well, what surprised me is, well, first of all, I wrote it on 3 levels. If you do not have any religion or faith at all, I wrote it like you would read Star Wars.
All right.
Just read it like that. It's fantasy. Read it. Don't have to believe any of it. Secondly, if you're a Christian, I wrote it and it has some footnotes that you could always look up, which people have. And then third, I wrote, if you're a deeper Christian, deep dive type thing, I have a Bible study that's attached to it on my website.
Oh, okay.
So I have it on 3 different levels. Doesn't matter, what faith you are. And there's so many reviews I'd gotten that people said, I got this. I thought it was gonna be one of those religious books, and I just don't do well on those. But when I got into it, I realized that, this is, it's not just that. It's it's an action adventure, fantasy, sci-fi, that kind of stuff. And they said they really like that. I've got a number of reviews on all books like that. And then on the other hand, I got reviews where people said, this book really touched me. I'm really identified with this angel or that angel, because I wrote these angels in a way to where they have human reactions.
Right.
And I don't think that's unrealistic, because our if you're a religious person, our personalities are created, and if you have in the Bible it says some angels rejected God and others did not, well, then they had a free will, and they had like a human type of point of view on that.
Right.
So I had these angels that are like the protagonist, Azarius, is the leader of the Septemviri, the 7 angels.
Right.
And he is an unknown angel, never done anything great, and he is very insecure about leading. He thinks he's just leading 7 angels. He's very insecure about that against maybe a band of renegades. And as it grows to millions and billions that he's confronting, it's like, oh my gosh, I can't do this, And
Right.
so a lot of people have identified that. I have another angel named Squatinadel. I made the name up because I think it means devil angel or something like that.
Right.
I looked it up, and he is kind of insecure a little bit because he doesn't look as beautiful as the other angels. He doesn't have the svelte and the beautiful appearance, but he just wanted to do what he's supposed to do. But that was something that he never understood, why he was built that way. And that's a big thing. So the reviews I get back talk about these things, and it's fun to see people actually get it.
Right. And I 100% agree. And what you were talking about with the angels having like their own personalities and stuff, it actually reminded me of, I remember I was talking with you about this when we met at the Festival of Books. My own take on this story, or a story like this, Michael, the Last Angel of Earth. I remember when I wrote the initial draft for that and I sent it to my friends, they said, this is fascinating. It's unlike anything. And almost like what I kind of wrote like one of the 3 steps where if you are religious, you can enjoy it like that. If you're into fantasy, you can read it like that. And a lot of people said when they initially read the summary, again, like as you said, like, oh, I'm not really into religious books, but I'll give this a try. They read the entire thing and it's like, wow, this is incredible. And talking about the characterizations of all the angels, it's really interesting to really flesh out these characters
Mhm.
and make them very human in a sense. And I remember one friend asked me who read it, says, how'd you come up with a story like this? And I said,
Mhm.
I just wanted to make my own, in essence, Lord of the Rings story without it being Lord of the Rings. So was that kind of like the thought process for you, Nick? You want to make a story that you would enjoy reading and purchasing if it was made by someone else?
Yes, and I like fantasy. I like action adventure, but also I like to see characters develop. And I have a secret for your new authors right now. One that I learned at a book conference, one of the 2 or 3 book conferences I went to 10, 11 years ago. One way to develop characters that I learned, and I'm still using it, is that there's a psychological profile called Myers-Briggs. Are you familiar with that? Did you take a
I
psychology
think I've
class?
heard of that
All
before.
right. So there's a Myers-Briggs thing. And one of the instructors at one of the book conferences over a decade ago had introduced that to me. And what it is that you have certain type of people, and there's like 8 or 10 different kinds, and you take each one, and it says how they react in certain situations, and that's a great starting point for creating characters. Then, of course, you now add to it as you're writing,
Right.
And so, actually, what I'm doing right now, I'm about 5 scenes away from finishing my first draft of my next book. And I actually stopped, went back to the Myers-Briggs things, and kind of flushed them out a little bit to make sure that the characters are all consistent between the first 2 books and the third book,
Right.
uh, so that they're not like, hey, this doesn't make sense. This person doesn't act this way in the other book. So that's what I'm doing right now. And so for you authors that are starting out, check that out. It's Myers-Briggs, Mayers, I guess. And you could get it online for free. It's in PDF form, and I think it will really help you a lot.
Nice. I'm actually glad you brought that up with like the psychological profile of the characters, because I definitely think it's important to make sure the character is like consistent throughout the story, but also see what specific event shapes who they are and see how they progresses throughout the story. And tying back into Michael using that method, the event that really shapes his core and who he is of course, committing the biggest sin an angel could do, which is
Mhm.
killing humans, killing the people of Earth, which is a huge sin. And it's actually in the beginning chapters of Michael, Last Angel of Earth. And that greatly shapes who he is. He's stripped of his wings, he's banished from the Watcher's outpost, and he's living as a Nephilim, a banished angel. And he has to go on a quest with other characters from other mythologies who have survived to try to save the world that's now pretty much been taken over by Lucifer Brightstar and his entourage of fallen angels, demons, hellspawns, and other evils from other mythologies. And it's a really fascinating story if you look in the sense of like it's the hero's quest, but it's
Mhm.
also going through, overcoming like a guilt of some kind.
Mhm.
And going back to the first rebellions, um, what was probably the one character that a lot of readers really identified with from the reviews and just from the overall response? Because for me, the one character that I truly loved was the main character, the one who's in charge of the seven. His story, and of course, Squintables, he was also second. Their dynamic is really, really fascinating. And they're kind of like a little bit like the black sheep of the angels. Even though they're in this society, they don't really have that kind of confidence as Michael and the others do.
Mhm. Yeah, in fact, Azarius is when you're talking about.
Right.
That's what a lot of people identify, because there is a journey you see in his life in that book, that extends to the other books after that. But a lot of people, I think, may start off with something feeling insecure, that they are not up to the task. And I would say probably everybody at some time in our life. And he's a good character to look at and say, one step at a time. As I fall, as I crash, I get back up and I brush myself off and I keep walking. And even in the book, I'm not going to say which character it was, but there is one of the characters when Azarius is at the bottom of his emotions, another character comes to him that you wouldn't even think would be this character and pumps him up and is saying that they admire him. And I think if, one of the things that people are afraid of is failure. And I guess I've not been afraid of failure much. It's not that I like to fail. It's not that when I do fail, I don't sit here and lick my wounds, but I just kind of accepted it, because in my life, there was things that have, I failed here, but there was something else, another door opened up, and I walked through that door and just kept moving forward. And you look back at the failures and you've learned by them, and it actually helped build your character. And that's in how to say that in a novel, the character is built by their failures. The character is not built by what they accomplished, because if they accomplished everything, just think of it this way. If you think of Superman, let's say the first Superman, not George Reeves on TV, because you and probably everybody else here is too young to even know that, except me. But like Christopher Reeves, he's learning his weaknesses, he's learning his failures, his the kryptonite and his inabilities and things like that. That's what built his character. If the whole thing was just him, what was that, Lex Luthor,
right,
or whatever his name was, Gene happening. That's like I tell you.
Mm-hmm.
If the whole thing was just him winning the whole time, it's like, so what? I can't even identify with this guy. But if he fails, the character is built, and as a human, we can identify with that because we fail a lot. And if they can get up and keep walking towards their destiny, so can we.
Nice. And I'm going to ask another question tying into what you said. So in books, whether they be fiction or nonfiction, it's always like a promise or like a theme that the author expects from the reader. In a case like a promise, the author will mainly say, you will experience this emotion, or you will be taken to this journey, or you will have an epiphany. So for First Rebellions, what is a promise you are making to the reader, and has that promise been validated and honored?
Mm-hmm. Okay, now when I say this, do I have to like hold my hand up and?
Oh no, no,
okay.
no.
Okay, all right. Well, the first promise is not going to contradict the Bible. That's the first promise, and it even has that in my preface, that it's not going to contradict the Bible. So that even though it's fantasy, there's not much written in it. So that's very important. The second thing is that what I mentioned before is that you don't have any faith to even read this book. It doesn't matter. I have a lot of male people, men in my life who were influencers in my life that were atheists. So it doesn't bother me one bit. The other thing is that the laws of nature don't necessarily apply in the spiritual world. And so you'll see things that can't happen on earth, but they can happen in the spiritual world, because that's the way I wrote it. But that's a great thing, is that when you're dealing with the spirit world, you don't have the laws of nature, you can do that. And kind of like we talked about Superman, he actually invalidates some of the laws of nature, like gravity. I mean, they can fly, for one thing. And so that's important. And the other thing is that you're going to see journeys of characters that are, as I said, you'll probably be able to identify with at least one, maybe two or three, and that you will see as they go through their struggles and as they are tempted by Satan. And that's the thing, is that when I said the internal struggles, is that he can turn, like he does on humans, he can turn on them and make their insecurities and their temptations come up, promising them things in order for them to turn to his side.
Right.
Different than Darth Vader. If you go back to Star Wars, he would say like, Luke, come to the dark side and make you great. But that was kind of limited about what he could
Mm-hmm.
do for Luke. And with in this, there is a much bigger um, reward in a evil temptation.
Right.
And there's also a terrible demise for them too. So it's a much greater temptation. So that's the other thing is that we want the people to identify the characters and to see that that there is a good and there is an evil, and that as you read this novel, you could think about all the other novels you've read of good against evil. Doesn't matter if it's Sam Spade, the Maltese Falcon, or any of those other
Right.
things, is that it's all good against evil. And this is where it began.
Nice. Very nice. Now, another question I did want to ask you, and it's probably one of the most important ones, is so authors always have bad days, or sometimes they don't feel as motivated. I myself have had those days where I don't want to write and just want to take a
Mhm.
break from writing. So, for you, Rick, have you ever had those days where you don't want to write, but then decide, I'm going to write. I need to write. What pushes you to continue this project, this passion of yours, even
Mhm.
when you had those bleak moments?
Well, I'm probably different than most people. And the reason why is because I've already had a successful career. Right? I mean, I'm retired from that first career. And so I don't have to worry about putting food on the table for a kid or two kids, or having a wife that's working really hard in her profession while I'm a struggling writer trying to sell 6 books today, you know? So I'm different than most people. Um, but what uh, what I do have is that I have to balance the stuff like the marketing, and that is like I have like somewhere between 7,500 and 8,000 followers on my newsletter, and so I am serving them. I'm actually writing free short stories for them about every quarter, and I have contests going on. So that's one thing that I do, and I go, okay, I want to get back to writing, but I've got other things to do. That's part of an author's life that I have to do. So it's kind of the opposite of me,
Right.
is that I have to like let's say a Goodreads with the free books. They give like 100. It's like a contest, and they give 100 free books, ebooks away. So you have to write that out and put that out and different things like that. So for me, it's not hard for me to write, and I could pretty much sit down and write anytime. And how that, maybe this will be more of an answer to what you asked. How that happens is that when you're not writing, you're always thinking about it, and that drives my wife nuts.
I apologize for that. That never usually happens, but to get back what you were saying, so just a recap. So you said before that you already had landed a successful life. You already got what you wanted to do, and now you're doing writing. You're now writing free short stories for your followers. And you have your newsletter, which has these contests.
Mhm.
So going back to the original question,
No, no.
um,
So there's one more thing I said. So
oh yes, of course,
basically,
okay.
is that what helps me write is that when I'm not writing, I'm thinking about the story, and that helps a lot. And so whether like this morning I was swimming, I was thinking about the story. We owned horses for 10 years. When I was on the horse, I'm thinking about the story. And sometimes it drives my wife crazy because she's, Earth the Rick, where are you? What planet are you on? And I think that's important. And it's important at the very beginning. What I used to do was carry a little pocket notebook, And if I had an idea or somewhere, I'd write it down. What I did, we were just came back from Alaska, and we were on
Right.
a small boat. And as we were on that boat, what I decided to do, because we weren't seeing any whales at the time, is I just observed people. And so I took out my phone and I just wrote like a little few lines about a person that I was observing, about how they act and their mannerisms. And I will use that in some book and somewhere. And so I think that's the important thing, is that life introduces a lot of situations to you as a writer. It not just when you sit down and you're typing, and to be able to use those, put them down and bring them back to when you're ready to type, because then you'll hit the ground running probably.
Nice. Very nice. So now leads into more like the fun questions, and these are questions I really like to ask. So, Rick, growing up, were there any authors that you really, really enjoyed, and now looking back at them now as an author, they've kind of changed?
Mm-hmm. Well, you know what? It's interesting is that my parents were divorced when I was 5.
Ah, okay.
Okay. And my mother was a waitress working 2 jobs. My mother did not read other than the paper, newspaper. And I grew up in a household with not a single novel until the 9th grade. And so when the 9th grade came, there was a teacher that had a course that was Nobel Prize winners. And so we read a book from about 9 Nobel Prize winners over the semester. And that opened my eyes. And one of those authors was Pearl S. Buck. And Pearl S. Buck, I just loved how she put together culture and history and character development in all of her books. And I still read her books. I probably have read 6 of her books. And so she's an old time author. And so I really like that. I think that there's been other authors that have come around that I've read where as I became a writer, I would see how they're developing their characters or how the prose they're using, the type of language they're using. And I just say, wow, that's fantastic. You know, that they could actually use this language in order to be able to bring out the character. Another thing I do is that I am a reviewer for an on-site review site. So I'm reading a lot of new author stuff. And
All right.
and I post reviews on that site, and then I'll put one like on Goodreads. And I'm impressed with a lot of the new authors, unknown authors coming out in some of the language. And I will put that in the review. I will say things like some of them, I can think of one that I put, I'd say, you know, when I read this is to the level where I say, when I read like other Pulitzer Prize winners like that, I'd say, when I read this, I say to myself, man, I wish I could write like that. And they love that. And they love to hear that in the review. And so, and it's honest. It's really honest. It's that, you know, everybody has their own gifts. And it's great when you see people exercising these gifts in different ways. And so it's kind of, it's changed a lot for me. And even in the critique book group I lead for a site, I see new authors. It's fun.
Awesome. Awesome. Now, kind of a follow-up to that, what books would you say have been your biggest form of inspiration in terms of like writing, character development, setting, pacing? What books have really kind of molded you as a writer?
Yeah. Well, as I said before, the Pearl S. Buck's books was like The Good Earth. And she also did based on other countries too, where she did cultures. But also is that from the fantasy world, the Chronicles of Narnia is very interesting. I like C.S. Lewis a lot. I've read actually nonfiction C.S. Lewis books a lot, and have seen movies and plays about him. And when you're reading that book, you see the parallels of things that he wrote about. The Lord of the Rings, of course, is another fantasy book that's always great to read. Ted Decker's The Circle Trilogy is another one that's great. So that's in the fantasy level. Now, the one book that I could tell. Let's see if I can remember his name. Let's see, Nguyen, he's a Pulitzer Prize winner, and I should know his name. I read 2 of his books because my wife introduced him at a university talk, Pulitzer Prize winner, and she got a signed book from him, and I didn't know who he was, and so I read it, and he really it's called The Sympathizer, and
Okay.
it's about the people, the people, the people, the common person in Vietnam right after the Vietnam War ended, and so it was really good. I mean, that's one of the guys where I read his book years ago that I said, wow, I want to write like this, and that was really good. His name will come to me in a minute, but I know Nguyen is his first name, I guess. So, but it's been a while since I said his name.
Nice. That's actually really cool. I always like asking these questions because I learn about a bunch of authors that I've never known about and a bunch of books I've never heard about. So I always like asking these questions. And another question which I want to ask you, and this is probably one of the most important ones I like to ask, is um, are you a traditional published or self-published author for the
Mhm.
Angelic Wars
Mhm.
series?
Yeah. Now, I am a self-published author, even though there's a printer that probably has their name on the books. But I learned after I made that decision about the 2 different things. And I think it's important, as far as advice, that when you start off, think about which direction you want to go. And I was taking this course, and that what I learned, and it was validated by other people, is that if you are a published author, traditional publishing, you're writing for the publisher. The
Right.
publisher, the editors, they're the ones that decide what makes it and what doesn't. When you're self-published, even though I use editors, I hire editors that go through my books and give me comments, things like that. You're writing for the reader, and that's what I rather do. And also is that I could just change directions, as long as readers are asking for that and they like that. And so that's why I'm a self-published author. Now, if I was 25 years old, and I was having a budding career with with a wife and who's working, and 3 toddlers and whatever it is,
Right.
that may have been different. Um, but I also had learned from a course that as a published author is that they're going to ask you what your platform is anyway. What do you have that is going to promote this book? And I got to do that anyway, as a self-published author. And then the other thing is I heard is that many times, just from somebody who actually worked for a big book company, they may blow their entire budget just in the first month, just on your release, when you release your book, because that's what counts. When you
Right.
get up to that level and you're getting, #1 bestseller or whatever it is, the thing, that's what they want to do. They want to get legs and things like that. But then there's nothing much after that. And that the risk of what I've been told, because I've not experienced this, is that if you have a traditional publishing, they send your books to Barnes and Noble and places like that. If they're not selling, I don't know what the time frame is, a few weeks or whatever it is, they send all the books back. They send the books back, and then after that, you're kind of marked as being an author who didn't make it. And this is not me speaking. This is actually it's Thomas Erstad who said this. He's
Mhm.
some of the courses, and uh, and that's devastating. It's
Yes.
devastating and for somebody. So I like the self-publishing area, but you got to know, you have to learn the marketing part, which I'm always learning. I'm always learning, and it's changing. It changes all the time. So you have to decide early which direction you're going to go, because you're going to have to build up certain things for that. Like doing your pitch and everything like that. But either
Right.
way, you've got to have your own platform, and you got to build your own followers.
Definitely. And also just to add more to that for self-publishing, um, also it takes a lot of your own finances to get it up and running for the marketing as well. You
Yes.
got to really sell your book on every platform. And I also think another truth for the self-publishing people who want to go down that route, and I spoke with another author, Natalie Wright. She actually gave me this really, it's not like a hard truth, but it's one truth I think a lot of aspiring self-publishing authors need to consider is that your debut novel is most likely not going to be the one that people are going to know you for. It will
Yeah.
probably be your third or your fourth novel that really sells you. And
Mm.
she explained that Season of the Dragon is her seventh book that she published. Well, the first book that she self-published, but the seventh one in total of published works. And it's that book that people know her more for. And they have
Mhm.
her other six books to really look into. And
Mhm.
really considering that, it really puts things into perspective. Like, she's kind of right. I mean, you can put a lot of hard work into a work for the self-publishing route, but you may get a few reviews, and sometimes that may kind of dampen a person's self-esteem and saying, should I even continue this?
Mhm.
But as she said, keep going, keep going, keep writing, because you're going to land on that one book that's really going to make a name for yourself. And guess what? You've written three other books that people can now enjoy. And now you have a much larger fan base. So I definitely think that's another thing to consider when going into the self-publishing route. It is a lot more creative in a sense of you have a lot more creativity and ownership of your work, but you have to really put in the effort. You have
Mhm.
to transition your mind from the writer who's just writing for fun to the business side. It takes a
Mhm.
lot of work, a lot of dedication. You need to treat it like a regular job. And if you do that, as she said to me, you're going to make a name for yourself in the book world.
Mhm. Yeah, and if you take the route of self-publishing and you do the number of books like you said, doesn't mean that a publisher is not going to pick you up after those. That can happen too.
That is
And then
also
you
true.
and then you don't have to worry about being, the one book failure type thing that story that I heard. But no, it's a lot of work, but you have to really enjoy it. It's important, and that's why it's good to enjoy the topic that you're writing. Because if you're writing about something that you kind of like a passing fad, or you want to write about because that's what people are reading right now, and you're not enjoying it, you're really not. It'd be kind of hard to see if you could come out with a good novel.
Right. Wholeheartedly. I wholeheartedly agree. And we're nearing now towards the end of the interview. We just have a few more questions left. And another question that I want to ask you, Rick, is um, has anyone ever compared your book to another work? And the reason why I ask this question is a lot of people who I've interviewed, when I get this question, they've always said, oh, you're the next Stephen King, or you write like George R. R. Martin. A lot of authors say that's good, and a lot of authors say that that's kind of though they don't want to be considered in that same. They like the comparison, but they don't want to be seen as the next so and
Mhm.
so. So, has anyone ever compared your work to a previous work?
No, no, nobody's actually compared me to another person at all. When I
Really?
tell them about the book, yeah, when I tell them about the book, they say, "Oh, like Paradise Lost, right?" And I say, "Well, not really." I
Right.
said because Paradise Lost takes place in the Garden of Eden, and actually, my wife and I were talking about this morning. I think it's been years I read it. I think that might have been the motivation for Satan was he was jealous of humans, but I don't remember. It's been a long time, but it's not like that type of thing. It doesn't take place in the Garden of Eden. It takes place in heaven.
Okay.
We lost you for a moment there again.
Yeah. Apologies for that. My old computer is acting up. Science. I need to get a new one. But you were saying again about Paradise Lost.
Yeah, it's a different setting altogether. Paradise Lost is in the Garden of Eden, if I remember, and my stuff is in heaven, where I had to create heaven with a few few things from the Bible, but for the most part, the Bible doesn't talk about what heaven looks like. It's impossible.
Right. But I won't lie though, when I actually read your book for the first time, and I remember we were talking at the Festival of Books, Paradise Lost came into the back of my mind. It's like it's kind of almost like not totally exactly the same thing, but I guess the one comparison you could make between the two is that the angels are the main characters, and they do kind of act very human in the sense they go through very human-like struggles, but as you say, they're very, very different. Paradise Lost is in the Garden of Eden, with Lucifer being the main character, and in Angelic Wars: First Rebellion, it's I'm gonna butcher the name, Azarias, Azurius,
Azarius. You can call him Azarias. Either way, you want a Greek influence or Roman influence, you
know. Okay, Azarias. I was thinking it was one of the two. But going back to what I was saying, like that angel is the main character, but it is fascinating. So, kind of leading up to that, what are your thoughts on sort of authors and the works being compared to previous works or previous authors? Do you think that's a good thing, or do you think that kind of changes that author themselves?
Well, it depends. If somebody is comparing you, saying, "Yeah, I read your book and it was just like this other book," the story, that's not good. But if somebody's saying, "Yeah, your style was a lot like Stephen King," it was like it kept me on the edge, and about the style of writing, that's a great compliment. Because you don't want to write a book that people get confused of the story because it's so much like another 5 books. I mean, that happens a lot. Even in, I was as a CPA, I was in the entertainment industry. I had producers as clients. And it was amazing on how many times that I remember when E.T. came out, there were these producers I knew, and everybody wanted to come out with something with an extraterrestrial after that. It's like, because it was successful. And you see that in even on television, and people try to copycat it because they're afraid to take the risk.
Right. And that actually kind of leads into another question, kind of a question going back to a sense of like being self-published or traditional published. Another one of my friends who went to the self-publishing industry said when going the either traditional publishing or any kind of publishing, one thing that kind of deters writers is the clicks or what's new. And as you said, everyone wanted to make an extraterrestrial because that made money, and it's like, okay, let's do this. Do you think that's kind of a bad thing for an aspiring writer in the sense that they're not truly giving their best or only writing for the new hot market that's happening right now, which may not be existing by the time their book's finished?
Well, people are listening who may have a wife or a husband at home and a kid. It's hard for them to not go that direction because they got to make a living, and they have a family to support and are partially support. But what I would suggest is to write what you like and find other ways to make income in the writing industry. You get things from like other sources like the Independent Book Publishers Association. They'll say, they're looking for editors, they're looking for proofreaders, they're looking, in other words, in the literature industry, there are money-making things that you have the ability to do without compromising your story and your passion. Because you got to be passionate with what you write about in fiction. I mean, you actually even write nonfiction. I mean, you'll probably find this funny, but I've written quite a few tax articles in CPA magazines and like that, and business and strategic planning articles like that. And at that time in my life, I was very passionate about that strategic planning, and even today, I'll use that passion to volunteer my services for nonprofits to do a strategic plan. So you got to find your passion. And I used to, when we were raising our kids, I used to say, do what you love to do. You can make money doing almost anything. So it's true. I mean, come on, pet rock, a chia pet. I mean, look how somebody made money doing that, and that was their passion.
That is true. That is very, very
Wait
true.
a minute. Do you even know what a pet rock is?
I think I remember Pet Rock. Yeah,
I gotta say, you're pretty young.
I'm a kid from the late '90s. I've seen a lot of stuff.
Yeah. No, you haven't.
At least of at least of my generation, I've seen a lot of stuff.
Okay. I'll give you that.
And kind of like probably like the third to last question, which I probably think is like one of the biggest ones at this part of the interview is, so Rick, when you published Angelic Wars First Rebellion, you got it out there, you got a lot of these reviews. Did you ever have a sense of validation from the other authors in the community saying, this is amazing, you belong in this community, or no sense of validation? It's like, I just wrote a book that I really enjoyed and I'm glad people loved it. I didn't write it for validation to get praise and stuff.
I think the one thing that helped give me a little confidence is winning or placing in book contests.
Okay.
But you got to be careful. There's a site that you can find out whether they call them scam book contests. Not that they're not book contests, but there are some out there that are there just to make money. So what they do is that if you place or do something, they'll try to get you to buy their materials to do marketing. Okay, and there's other book contests that is just there for the author. So if you're going to enter a book contest, be careful. There are sites that have lists of good book contests. Look that up. Yeah, for both books, I did well in a book contest or two, and that helped. And also is that Goodreads is great because Goodreads, have good reviews on Goodreads. Goodreads has more serious readers that'll do a review. And so when you read those reviews, you can really take those to heart more. And you're going to get reviews that's going to say, I can remember one of my early reviews, the person said, give me a 1 star. Said, I just didn't get into this. And that was the end of it. That was a review. That was a review. And that's going to happen. There's going to be people that will read your book and they're going to get by the first chapter, the first, scene and it may not be the genre they like to read. It may be a bad day, or but it's going to happen. And
Right.
so I go back and I go back and see if there's new book reviews every now and then, maybe every couple weeks or 3 weeks. I don't do it as much as I used to. When I was a new writer, you're looking like, oh, there's another review, But now I don't do that. I go back every now and then. But and there used to be something on that you could reply back to the reviewer. And I used to write back to people regardless and said, thank you for taking the time to read the book and review. Now they stopped that on Amazon. I wonder if some authors are getting a little abrasive. like you don't know what you're talking about.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I've heard of something similar to that. Yeah. And a lot of authors on Amazon, they say the exposure is very nice and Amazon has its own things, but that's a whole other discussion. But I 100% agree that the exposure and like for other avenues is really, really good, and it's really, really, uplifting in a sense that okay, I found new audience I can really work with. I've discovered new readers and they really enjoy my work. And that is kind of a sense of like, okay, I can do something with this. This seems something really good. And ultimately, at the end of the day, as authors, we want to tell stories. We want to tell stories that people are going to enjoy, and we want to share that with everybody. Which then leads me to probably the very last question of the interview, which is, and you've probably given like I'll answer this throughout with a lot of really, really helpful advice, is at the end of the day, Rick, with everything that you've learned and experienced as a writer and through life, what are your words of wisdom to aspiring authors in the community?
Well, at the end of the day, it's 4 o'clock, 4:50. my alarm goes off. My wife says, "That's for you to stop writing." So I have an alarm on my thing because I could write a long time. Um, well, let's just go through the things I've said. All right, write what you're passionate about, and find a way to make a living, but don't compromise your passion. Decide whether you want to, and investigate it. You go to book conferences. Investigate whether you want to be a self-publisher or in the traditional publishing, and know what the risks are for both. Three, really take care of your readers, your followers. And I just don't send emails out like spam. I actually have a book contest for a $25 gift card each month. That is basically something in the book that's from the Bible, and they have to find it in the Bible. But I give them a hint. You can always Google it and find it in 5 seconds. But so I get a lot of people entering for that, which is great but people love it. They have so much fun doing this. They think, oh, thank you so much. And also give things to your readers. I write short stories. And it's free. And like I mentioned that before, because the readers are everything. And whether you're doing it, making $100,000 or $200,000, or you're doing it and you're making $6.80 in royalties from Amazon after the month is over, and you even wonder why they even bother sending it to you. It's all about the readers and taking care of them, and always keep that in mind. And as you read reviews, or you go to a book contest. There's one book contest I wanted to mention. It's called the Ben Franklin Awards. It's the International Book Publishers Association. They have reviewers that give you their reviews back. The reviews, and they have comments, and they have advice.
All right.
And so I take those to heart. There's a few book contests that do that, but this one in particular, because they're really into independent book publishers like that. So look for stuff like that. If you can, find a book coach. Susan May Warren was my first. I had after that I've had a couple people that I'd run things by, but find somebody to give you good, honest feedback. Good, honest feedback is not your mother and your brother and sister or people that want to make you feel good. It's nice to get their support, but you want somebody in the industry that could say, you're telling me this. You're not showing me. Telling versus showing. It's a very simple thing.
Right.
And so that's very important. So there's a number of things that I gave as advice that I mentioned before, but maybe mark those down as bullet points, and I think you'll really go a long way with that.
Pieces of advice, Rick, and probably some of the best I've heard in my time doing these author interviews. And I think with that, we will conclude our author interview. But before we end today, listeners, Rick, where can people find and engage with you to know more about your contest, your short stories, as well as the Angelic Wars series?
Well, I'm at www.angelicwars.com. You can find it there. You can always sign up for the email list there. We're, of course, on Amazon and in Barnes & Noble. We're on Goodreads. On Goodreads, what I do is that as I do book reviews of other, like I said, I do book reviews for a site. I will post my book reviews on there. So you can learn about,
all right.
You will learn, and it could be 5 stars, it could be 4 stars, it could be 3 stars. But I post honest reviews there if you want to see about the books I've read and reviewed and my take on them. You could check me out. Just email me if you have any questions at rick@angelicwars.com. I'm on Instagram, and we're putting more and more stuff on Instagram. Some of the stuff I'm putting on Instagram, by the way, are little secrets. As we traveled, we drove from Southern California to Alaska and back. I did videos, and some of the videos you'll see on there, and I'll give a little hint. This video will be a setting in one of my next books.
Okay. I kind of figured that's what it was because the way the description was like, wait a minute, is this leading to something in the book? Which seems that it is, which can't wait to see more of it.
Yeah, it's fun. That's why I was saying, always think about writing, even when you're walking through a cavern 250 feet below the surface.
All right. Well, listeners, I hope you enjoyed this amazing author's interview on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. Remember to check out Angelic Wars First Rebellion. I will link it down below along with all the socials and handles of Rick Norris. Rick, thank you so much for joining us today. And also apologies, listeners and Rick, for the technical difficulties. Do not worry, you will not see those in the final cut.
Well, thank you very much, Gabriel, for having me on today. It was a lot of fun. And as far as your computers, just a little bit of advice: make sure you feed the rats more often. Your computer will keep growing.
I will. I will. Well, listeners, this has been another great episode. Again, thank you to our guest, Rick, for joining us. And one final thing, I don't have it with me at the moment, but make sure to check out The Gathering as well. I will link it down below. And also be on the lookout for Amanus, Son of Persia, the next book in the Gathering series, which will be coming out soon. Well, this is the Wandering Scribe signing out. Have a wonderful day, everybody.